Hi class, I hope everyone is having a wonderful week 9. For this week's law and ethics assignment on professionalism and the future of MFT, I had the wonderful opportunity of interviewing 3 Alliance staff members: Dr. Dana Abraham, the professor for group therapy; Dr. Ashley Walsdorf, the professor for techniques and theories 1; and lastly, Ian Hammonds, my lab instructor for techniques and theories. Overall, I received a lot of new information, advice, and overall tips on the common themes in the MFT profession, as well as the struggles and issues in the corporate world, and also advice and methods on how to deal with clients and, of course, the future of our profession. I will talk about all of these aspects and my favorite questions that I had the pleasure of asking. First off, I will start with Dr. Dana Abraham. So one of the questions I asked was the emphasis on challenges in her current profession as an MFT. So what she saw was that the high-risk population has a lot of less resources and therefore require much more attention. And that was one of the glaring challenges in her field when she was providing therapy, that with this specific population, that because they have so many things going on and not enough resources available to provide for the coverage and care for therapy, they are unable to get that services that they need. Which brings us into our issue of financial issues and with healthcare and, of course, the insurance with the institutions and orgs. The idea is that there's not enough financial coverage for the therapist and the client. A lot of the emphasis is on kind of putting a lot of the burden on the therapists. For example, one of Dr. Abraham's close friends in the profession used to have about 38 clients with only 40 hours per week, and therefore there was not enough time to do her papers, have time for her own self-benefit. And Dr. Abraham even said that she didn't even have time to even use the restroom, and so even much less time to even collaborate with peers and even go to supervision, which is obviously very necessary. So it's always important to find the right balance, taking care of yourself along with getting the great advice and suggestions with your peers and from the supervisor. Let's see. Next, I had the opportunity to ask what were some of her most challenging cases, and this was one of my favorite questions that I had the opportunity to ask, such as like an impactful moment where you as a therapist crossed a boundary with a client, and how did you repair that therapeutic alliance. So for her case, Dr. Dana never had an opportunity to break confidentiality with families. She was always on top of her policies, and she also had good luck to not have to be put in that situation where she had to break confidentiality. And the second follow-up question was that how do therapists avoid imposing their own values and onto their clients? And truthfully, Dr. Abraham said that we are always imposing values. And in a way, this is kind of correct because we do have our own ideas of between right and wrong. And so imposing that values of rightness and correct values and ethical values is in of itself, in a way, imposing values. In the next question, I asked her about the law and legal guidelines and how she has applied that into her profession. Of course, she always said that her therapy services are always for the best interest of the clients, and when needed, she would write the specific follow-up and papers for example, hospitalizing people, which the form is 5150. And she also had to do some CPS reports, especially with children. And in fact, she would write out these CPS reports with the clients or the parents so that they would know exactly what Dr. Abraham was writing. And so the parents would also have a heads up, which I thought was a very good idea. All right, moving on to Dr. Walsdorf. I really liked this interview. I interviewed her with Raina as well as Andrew. Us three, we all asked different questions, and these were my questions for Dr. Walsdorf. So one of my questions was, how have you applied the knowledge of law and ethics into her practice? And she highlighted, of course, the consent forms is always highlighted. She would always go over her consent forms and especially mention confidentiality with her clients so that both therapists and clients are both on the same page. She even mentions on her consent form that she has stuff about seeing the client in public and how it would be handled, and even stuff as not being able to add each other on social media. She has that highlighted as well. She even has the storage of electronic medical records, how that would be kept, of course, through telehealth. And she even has best way to reach her on the consent form as well. And then lastly, for minors, there would be a separate form asking for a consent form for the minors, where even in instances of speaking about some potential issues such as bullying, drugs, and even sex, and the parents will also see that form as well, so that the minor can also check off on the consent form what they allow the therapist to share. So that way everyone is fully on board and know what they can share and what they cannot share. This next question was a very sensitive topic for her, and I definitely appreciate Dr. Walsdorf for sharing this with me. I asked her an impactful moment where she crossed a boundary with her client and how she repaired that therapeutic alliance. So in this case, Dr. Walsdorf had an issue with the clients about secret keeping. And in this scenario, she was seeing a relational couple of a man and a woman. And essentially the woman partner had felt that she felt a different way sexually attractive, and that she wasn't ready to share that with her husband. Ultimately, it took a month before the woman felt ready to share and how to deliver with her husband. But at that point, Dr. Walsdorf already knew about it in a separate manner, in which the wife communicated with the husband. And once the husband heard about his wife's feelings, Dr. Walsdorf was already knowledgeable about it and in the room, and that's when the husband felt betrayed and he broke down because he felt like the therapist and the wife colluded together. And of course, this was definitely not in the intention of Dr. Walsdorf, but she took the accountability of being wrong, and by telling and sharing to the husband and the wife separately. Dr. Walsdorf expressed that she was very, very sad that she harmed the husband, and she later reached out and individually met with the husband as well. And she added that eventually the husband did end therapy on a positive note, and they met their goals. Now with this, of course, the topic at hand is secret keeping, and through the change of that and just our common the belief on that is that now Dr. Walsdorf does not hold any secrets because of the tricky, you know, boundaries that it may create. So in this form, the therapist should always play the role as a translator and in a way of directing message in a different form, as well as creating a boundary and not creating any triangulation that would later harm the therapeutic alliance. So for example, it would be best for the therapist to find out from the wife that about her secret and then tell the wife that I'm sorry, or I have to tell your husband if it's okay with you, because I don't want to act like I'm colluding with you, or I don't want to, it would be unfair to the husband essentially. So there has to be a fairness and there has to be justness. Lastly, I got to ask any challenges that Dr. Walsdorf sees for individuals like myself coming into the MFT profession. She mentioned the challenges of telehealth and movement around the world, providing therapies across state. And of course, this all ties into knowing our California legal boundaries and knowing that us as therapists, we can only provide our services when we are on the soil of California. And lastly, I got to ask her where she sees the profession in 20 to 30 years. She added that there will be a lot of diversity, globalization, and rise of intercultural families. And of course, therapy is becoming much more expensive. And of course, interest in therapy will increase, but there might be the challenge of a disparity of people who can afford and access to therapy can be a rising issue. Lastly, I had the opportunity of interviewing Ian Hammonds. He has been an absolute godsend in our lab. I'm sure everyone in our class resonates with this and shares the same sentiments that he has been a wonderful teacher and just helping all of us throughout this course. So I was really excited to interview Ian, and so I asked him some of the challenges he faced in his profession. And of course, he mentioned stuff about balancing the relationships with the clients and balancing the relationship with ourselves. Having boundaries and being able to be available for everyone, but also being available and taking time for ourselves is very necessary. So the idea of self-care is always present. And he even added that relational clients have been very taxing. And of course, he tells everyone and just advises that relational clients will require a lot more energy. And so it is very necessary to be mindful. And I also added and asked if Ian would be open to co-therapy, but Ian has not done co-therapy before, but he is open to it. And then we were also able to talk about the financial thoughts of a therapist, and he even got to mention that the first couple years were tough, but after opening his private practice, it's been getting a lot better. Next, I asked him about the role law and ethics play in the profession, and he added that it's very important for couples and families to not be triangulated. It's unethical to provide unfair services to different members of the family, so it is always important to have boundaries set. Ian adds that in his consent form, he says, I don't do secrets and there's no secret keeping. And so he puts on his consent form that he will have to include the other person. Next, since Ian does work in Austin, Texas, the rules and the laws are a little different. For example, in Texas, there is no TerraSoft legal rules. So therefore, if someone in Texas reports to or tells Ian that that the client is feeling dangerous, he's wanting to harm someone, the therapist is not legally bound to report. But unlike in California, if we were to hear that as therapists, we will have to report always. All right. Next, I asked about the cultural awareness and sensitivity of the MFT profession. Ian said that it is easy to overstep into our boundaries because due to the fact that we have to bring our whole selves into the room with the client. By that he means it is very common to sometimes step into others' boundaries because of the nature of our profession as therapists to inquire about our clients, but it is very important to stay neutral and have the idea of staying within our confines. One of his experiences of crossing a boundary was during the remote years of COVID. He had a client who had a very abusive mother, and Ian would become very frustrated for the client because he would just be confused about why the client just keeps going back to her mother, even though the mother would be very aggressive and angry towards her. So the client noticed and asked Ian if he was angry or anything, and then of course Ian said, "You know what? I'm very sorry. I was trying to be protective over you, and I know that is not part of the boundary." And as a therapist, so he was able to repair that therapeutic alliance with the client. He added that, of course, for therapists, it is very important to not get defensive and to understand, and that will eventually heal and repair the therapeutic alliance. And being open and having that freedom for the client helps as well. And lastly, the challenges that Ian sees in our MFT profession. One of the main points he drove home was, Ian said, "We have to fight to be taken seriously." By that, he means many people don't take the profession of MFT therapist seriously, and it requires a lot of strength and perseverance as therapists to receive that respect and from others. Ian really drives this point home because he asked the same question of future challenges that Ian would see, and all his therapists have said the same. He also said that the work we do is magic, and that that is what keeps Ian going and making the relationship better, and of course for a client to see a therapist, it improves their overall state and their mood, and of course their mentality. Another issue of challenges he would see is even though there is the negative stigma for getting mental health checked on, even though it is improving, it still needs to become more and more normalized. All right, that is it for me, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed my notes and what I've got from my 3 interviewees. It was an awesome assignment, and I gained so much knowledge, and I'm looking forward to all your responses. Thank you.